Hello everyone, welcome to session 17 of LTEC 676, Social and Ethical Issues in Educational Technology. This video is designed to wrap up the course and send you off with a short summary of the topics we've covered. We'll do that by briefly recapping what we've covered this semester, revisiting the course learning objectives, and sharing a few ideas for possible next steps. So let's get started. What have we accomplished this semester? Well, we started out by situating educational technology within the broader context of society, defined as a group of people who live in a defined geographic area, who interact with one another, and who share a common culture. We acknowledged a variety of social problems such as poverty and inequality, and we placed education and technology as two separate yet overlapping components of society. We also defined educational technology. From there, we focused on some philosophical critiques of technology's role in society. For example, we talked about Marx's notion of phantom objectivity, the idea that people tend to think about technology as things that are objective, devoid of socioeconomic and political values. Of course, we learned this is not true, and that all technology, whether high-tech or low-tech, from chalkboards to supercomputers, are designed, produced, and deployed based on the social and political and cultural values of the human beings behind the technology. We also read about Sherry Turkle's idea that technologies such as computers and cell phones are based on what she calls a deceitful interchange. She claims they are designed to push our Darwinian buttons, and she wonders what kind of people we are becoming as we develop increasingly intimate relationships and dependencies with such machines. With this critical background in mind, we then reviewed different categories of educational technology and discussed the different ways schools use such technology. We covered common reasons why school districts invest in technology, including the challenge fixer rationale, the change agent rationale, and the economic competitiveness rationale. At that point, we started focusing on equity, distinguishing between equity and equality. Importantly, we learned that there are two dimensions to equity: fairness and inclusion. We then proceeded to think about the role of technology in addressing social problems and various documented inequities. To do this, we went back to the 1980s in the advent of the personal computer. From this perspective, we looked at how technology flooded into schools, how massive amounts of money were spent to technologize schools, how the resulting educational technologies were used, and how those technologies affected equity and equality both directly and indirectly. An important framework that we adopted was learning to assess school systems in terms of their inputs, processes, and outcomes. This allowed us to think holistically about how technology is impacting all learners in and out of school. Along this same line, we compared research from the 1980s and the early 2000s to see what's changed in terms of technology's impact on schools and society. For example, we looked at differing educational outcomes of historically underserved groups. This brought us to the instructional core and evidence that too many students in the U.S. have differential access in terms of teacher quality and curricular materials. And we paused to contemplate how technology might be used to address these inequities. Finally, we confronted the important idea of compounded inequalities and the realization that differences in access to educational opportunities are actually growing despite the technology-saturated world in which we live. Could it be possible that technology is actually making things worse and less equitable? At this point, we turn to Christo Sim's book, Disruptive Fixation, which examined in detail the excitement and support of a new school for digital kids, also known as Quest to Learn. We learned that this new technology-oriented school was not particularly successful, and that it even helped sustain and extend the status quo. We learned from Sims that over and over again, Americans follow a common pattern in devising educational prescriptions for specific social and economic ills, and that there is a recurring tendency to translate social, political, and economic concerns into educational problems and solutions. which has led to a situation in which public education has been asked to solve many problems that are far beyond its reach. Having acknowledged that the field of education is sometimes tasked with fixing problems that are not educational in nature, but are actually much deeper societal problems, we examined educational reform movements from the traditional and progressive perspectives. This allowed us to ask two loaded questions. Is public education tasked with solving problems that are far beyond its reach? Why or why not? And will public education be improved through technological innovation? Why or why not? In the last part of the semester, we learned about technology through the lens of disability and the notion of voice, asking critical questions pertaining to utopian visions of technology. We also examined gender in relation to technology in education, and we found clear evidence that females continue to dominate in higher education, yet despite their success in school, there have been troubling drops in female participation in computer science and in the rank and file of today's major technology companies. Relatedly, we introduced the idea of the technology pipeline and how feminist critiques of modernity have helped us learn to ask critical questions that interrogate and unmask the politics embedded in the design of technology. In the final weeks, we introduced the concept of digital intelligence in the 8 interconnected areas that make up this wheel of technical, cognitive, and social-emotional competencies. We also read Miller's warning that we should not let technology be at the top of schools' hierarchical structures. And to avoid such a worrying and dehumanizing scenario, we need to think about how we as educators can implement technology in ways that promote student empowerment and voice, protect the well-being of the community, and interrogate the status quo. Finally, we concluded the course by answering our driving question: what should an educator know about educational technology? An educator should know that when used deliberately, digital technologies can play a central role in democratic education and education for social justice. And educators should know that to use technologies in this way, we need to ask the right questions about dialogue and voice, classroom community, and emancipatory knowledge. And that, my friends, is the semester in a nutshell. That's a lot of important ideas and knowledge, so well done, everyone. So what about our learning objectives? Let's take a minute to review those objectives so we can contemplate how well we did in terms of meeting them. Well, our first learning objective was to understand, analyze, and evaluate the complex interactions between education and technology. The second learning objective was to analyze and evaluate the social and ethical impact of new and existing educational technologies. And our third objective was to create digital artifacts that demonstrate how to use various technologies to increase equity and benefit all learners. Looking back, I hope you feel the course content and activities aligned with and helped us meet these objectives, and that we were able to move up and down all of the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. To end, I want to share a few ideas about where you might go from here. First, I encourage you to keep reading about the nature of technology and the social impacts of technology. Second, I'd like to encourage you to look for other courses within the UH system. That's one of the benefits of going to school at such a large institution. You might find related classes in sociology, in history, in ed foundations. Next, consider following influential thinkers and media/technology theorists such as Henry Jenkins or Douglas Rushkoff and Sherry Turkle. All of them are constantly writing and sharing their thinking about the role of technology in society and in education. And finally, keep an eye on the headlines and how major technology companies are portrayed and how their motives are questioned or not in the popular press. Take it together, these are a few different ways you might consider continuing your growth and learning in this particular area. All right, everyone, we're out of time for the semester. Thank you for all your hard work and enthusiasm. I enjoyed working with all of you as we explored this important and timely view of educational technology. Mahalo, good luck with your final paper, and have a great holiday season.